Dr. Quetzal's a real mystery. But I can turn that to my advantage. I just need to focus on the strangest pieces of the puzzle. So when did Albert become a resident of your institute?
Albert and Hobart, or Ibn as you call him, arrived here almost exactly 4 years ago.
Could you describe that day more specifically?
It was not long after New Year's Eve, maybe the first week of the year, if I'm not mistaken. It was sleeting that day. Wind was banging incessantly on the windows. The power was going out for short periods of time.
What was your first impression of them?
I already knew the Wessler name. I knew who they were. Or at least I knew one of them, Hobart Wessler. He was famous. Gangster, moneylender, celebrity, lover.
And Albert?
He was new to me, an invisible gray ghost. The family had tried to keep his existence a secret.
Why?
Because they were ashamed of him, of course, Mr. Featherland. That's how it usually is.
What was your first impression of him?
He was silent, but observed everything that surrounded him. His eyes were constantly moving, never stopped for a second.
Was he afraid?
I wouldn't say so. It seemed to me that he wanted to move into our institution voluntarily. It looked as if he couldn't wait to be here, alone, locked up in silence and darkness.
Didn't you think of that as unusual?
Of course I did, but who am I to judge? It was rather special treatment.
What kind of special treatment did Albert get?
You know, if an institution like ours has to accept a Wessler as a guest, there's bound to be some favoritism.
And complete secrecy, I guess.
Yes, but that's the case for all our patients, Mr. Featherland.
Of course. So in what way did he receive more than the others?
Basically, we don't admit anyone into our institution without a complete and thorough prior assessment. In the case of Albert, we put that aside.
So you didn't even know if he had anything wrong with him?
Initially, no. He was more of a guest than a patient.
How did Albert relate to you?
Albert was immensely sophisticated and polite, so much so that his true emotions and thoughts could not be deciphered.
And that's why you thought of him as an exciting case.
That's right, Mr. Featherland. I see you're starting to get to know me in some way.
I'm just doing my job, Doctor.
You and me both.
Are you telling me Albert had multiple personalities?
We found out very quickly that there was no other reason for the cause of his seizures. He had a cold and calculating personality who sometimes, especially on stormy days, took the reins over their shared mind.
He had these seizures from the beginning.
Yes, Mr. Featherland, but they started to intensify after Albert left our institution for the first time.
He did what? Left the institution? More than once?
Oh, yes, Mr. Featherland. Albert left the institution on several occasions until the last time, when he failed to come back.
Quetzal's not only very observant, but he's addicted to details. I must focus on that if I want to get closer to the truth. Focus. Addicted to details. When and why did Albert leave the institution for the first time?
It was about 2 years ago. Mr. Hobart Wessler appeared and demanded we let his brother go free. Naturally, we obliged. We had no idea if we'd ever see him again.
But you did.
He returned the same day. Albert was ecstatic. He was unrestrained. I could almost say happy.
That was unusual for him?
I had never seen him like that before, Mr. Featherland. He just smiled and stared at the empty wall for hours.
Did he ever tell you what happened to him outside?
Of course he did. Albert and I had a good relationship. He was working on a painting for his brother.
Was it a painting of a lovely lady cat?
Oh, exactly. So you already knew about that.
Yes, Dr. Quetzal, I've seen it. Did Albert tell you how he felt about the painting?
From the first moment, he loved it. He was fascinated by it. But who could blame him? A little diversity, fresh air, a beautiful lady, and of course, on top of all that, he could finally do what he loved best: paint.
Which could be a surprisingly effective therapy.
It could have been. Unfortunately, these excursions have greatly intensified his seizures. They have become more frequent and extreme.
So Albert left on many occasions to continue working on the painting.
Exactly, Mr. Featherland. Every time he came back, he was like a different person. But unfortunately, his seizures also multiplied and became more dangerous.
More dangerous?
Albert was hurting himself, and on one occasion he even tried to hurt me. It was unprecedented. It seemed his confined personality was taking over their shared mind entirely, piece by piece.
Do you think the painting caused it?
Not the painting, Mr. Featherland.
But its subject.
Exactly. He was obsessed, right until that fateful day when he returned to us for the last time.
What exactly happened that day, Doctor?
It wasn't Hobart who brought his brother back that day, but two of his gorillas. Not literally, I mean. And Albert was in a terrible, terrible state.
What happened to him?
I don't like to talk about that, Mr. Featherland.
It could be vital to the case, Dr. Quetzal. Don't back down.
Oh, you're right. There's no use turning back now. So, Albert's tongue was torn out, or cut off, I don't know exactly, and he was blinded in one eye, or rather, one of his eyes was missing entirely.
So you're saying Albert was brought back horribly mutilated?
Yes. And they didn't give any explanation as to what had happened. They simply told me it was some kind of accident.
Dr. Quetzal is cold and professional, but he's also very confused. Maybe it's cruel, but I must exploit his vulnerability if I want to learn everything about Albert. Focus, confused. The two fellas who brought Albert back, could you describe them?
Those two fellas, as you put it, were two remarkably huge, rude men.
A ram and a bobcat, perhaps?
No, one of them was a tiger, if I remember correctly. He had a rather fresh bump under his left eye, and the other one was a penguin. But I've never seen a penguin that big in my entire life.
Did they tell you anything besides it was an accident?
They didn't say anything, but gave an obvious signal that I had to keep quiet about what happened.
I see. Concentrate, Doctor. What do you think happened to Albert?
I'm sure it was Hobart. He ordered his men to mutilate poor Albert.
But why would he do that?
Maybe Albert saw something he could accidentally reveal.
To whom? The four walls? A couple of crazies? You?
To anyone, Mr. Featherland.
I don't think it's that simple, Doctor. But thank you for your honest opinion.
You're welcome, Detective.
What happened then? How did Albert disappear?
A few weeks later, Hobart came to visit Albert one more time. Albert had been in terrible condition by then. We even had to transfer him to another cell, a more safe one.
What did Hobart do during the visit?
He didn't do anything. He just sat and watched his brother, who was in an almost vegetative state by then.
Couldn't you manage to draw anything out of him? You or Hobart?
Nothing. For a while, he was trying to signal something. Perhaps he was too afraid. And most likely his fingers had been broken too, so he couldn't even write.
Do you think Hobart could have killed Albert?
It's horrible to say it, but I'm sure of it.
How did he disappear in the end? Did someone come for him?
That's what's most eerie about it all, Mr. Featherland. He simply disappeared. His door, which only I had a key for, was open.
Did anyone see anything?
No one. We interrogated the staff, even the patients. He simply vanished off the face of the wilderness. We don't know what happened to him.
Unfortunately, I have a hunch. Thank you, Doctor. You've been a great help.
Oh, well, I'm glad I could be of help. But please, I now must attend to my work.
We understand, Doctor. Thank you. That's quite shocking information.
I think you understand why we kept it a secret. If it wasn't for Mr. Wessler's demand, we'd never let any of our patients walk freely outside our institution.
Then the accident happened.
Accident? Ha! We didn't believe it, not for a second. After Albert came back to us, horribly mutilated, he was different.
Different how?
If someone got one of his eyes poked out and his tongue torn out, he'd be different, but not like this. Albert was a different person.
We believe you, Doctor. So, can we take a look at Albert's cell?
I'd rather call it his room. Mr. Wessler lived in exceptional circumstances.
Thanks to the Wessler name, I guess.
Yes. Well, we try to make all of our patients stay as comfortable as possible, but Albert certainly enjoyed special favoritism.
I hope you don't mind if we take a look around in there.
That's not going to bother anyone.